Greetings, faculty, and welcome to another WIS technology tutorial. In today's topic, I'm going to be talking about the Google Apps script called DocAppender. So the purpose of this script is to be able to take a Google form, such as this one, and have all of the data entered append to a Google Doc. Now, a recent example of this is I've asked you to submit these iPad stories, successes you've been having with iPads in the classroom. And the minute you submit, it will land in this Google Doc that is viewable by everyone. So this way we'll have kind of a running library of success stories and contact points for talking about ways to use iPads in the classroom. So this idea also has other applications. So one idea that comes to mind is creating a course exit ticket or a class exit ticket, I guess you could say. But what that means is basically at the end of the lesson, you could have a Google form that consists of one question, perhaps asking the student, name one thing that you took away from this lesson or something along those lines, which they would then fill out that Google form, and the information would arrive and land in one Google Doc that could be shared with the rest of the class, or you could just keep it to yourself as well if you wanted to have kind of a running record of understanding after that class. So it'd be a good way to kind of reflect on the class. And also, it's a very iPad-friendly, iPhone, Android device-friendly way of collecting information from your students. So I'm going to show you how to accomplish this, and there are a lot of steps, so you'll have to bear with me as I will try to explain everything as slowly and clearly as possible. So here we go. So step one is simply to create a folder that will house all of the necessary Google Drive documents for making this happen. So I'm going to click on Create Folder, and I'm going to name this folder Exit Tickets. Now I'm going to go into that folder. Now inside of this folder, there may be on occasion a time where I want to ask the same question over and over and over again, but I want it to append to a different document, okay? So for example, let me just create I guess we could call it a template document, but it's not really. But I'm going to create a new document inside of this Exit Tickets folder. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to call this one Lesson 1. And I'm going to close. I'm now going to add another one. And I'll call this one Lesson 2. Here's why this is important. I may be asking a question, as I stated in the beginning of this video, about what did you get from this class? What was the number one takeaway? Something along those lines. And these lessons, Lesson 1 and Lesson 2, could be about two very different topics. So in order for me to stay organized on my end, if I want a record of what the kids understood in Lesson 1, I will be appending that Google form data to Lesson 1. And the same applies for Lesson 2. So if I want to find out what the students got out of that lesson number 2 on a very different topic, I don't want that to be added to this document. I want it to be added to this document. And of course, you would likely name these either based on a date or a unit or a topic, so on and so forth. But I'm going to keep it simple and just call it Lesson 1 and Lesson 2. So again, these are just empty documents that are just named according to how I've organized my lessons. Okay, so that's the exit ticket folder, or the templates in the folder. So now we need to actually create the ticket itself. Now this is a Google form, so maintaining, we want to still do this work inside of this exit tickets folder. So if you're in the folder, go ahead and click create and select form. Of course, you can choose a theme. I'm just going to choose a simple blue form, and I'm going to give it a name. Exit ticket form, so I know that I'm working on the form. Great. So now I can add my one question that I'm going to ask my students to answer. So I'm going to choose a paragraph text so they have enough space to write. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to have them write about one thing you learned this class. More of a statement than a question, I guess. So, and I'm going to make it a required question. And then I'm going to add one more item. This is something that the student does not need to interact with, but is necessary for this script to work. So I'm going to add a text item, and I'm just going to call it document ID. And I'll make this a required question as well. Now the reason the document ID is necessary is because this is going to automatically be populated with the document key of these Google Docs that we've created. Here's lesson 2 and of lesson 1 as well. So there's kind of a long code that's attributed to each of these Google Docs. So we need a place for that to be in this form in order for the ticket to be submitted to the right Google document. And this will make more sense once you go ahead and go through this with me. But for now, we're going to leave it just as is. So write about one thing you learned this class, and then the document ID. Now, before we're done with this, we need to do a few more things. We need to uncheck this box that is requiring students to log in. I've run into problems before when this box has been checked, so go ahead and uncheck that. This means that people outside of the domain could potentially submit this form, but it's highly unlikely unless they know the URL of that document you're working with. So you can go ahead and click OK. And then at the bottom, make sure that you remove this option to show link to submit another response. The reason we want to remove this is because if they click on the link to submit another ticket, the document ID will not appear pre-populated. So we don't even want to give them the option to submit again. If they want to submit again, they'll have to go back to the link that we've originally shared with them. So go ahead and uncheck that. So now this is a perfectly structured Google form that will work with the DocAppender. So now we have to actually choose a response destination. This is just multiple words for saying pick a spreadsheet to pour the data into. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the response destination, and I'm just going to have it create a new spreadsheet called exit ticket form responses. And I'll go ahead and create that. And you can see it's setting up the spreadsheet, and it's done. Okay. And there's also a link to the live form here. So if I click here, I can see what my form looks like. And again, this will look pretty much the same on an iPad or mobile device as it will on your computer. It's very simple, short, easy to understand, so on and so forth. So that's what the form looks like. And then the spreadsheet is under here, View Responses. Okay, so we have 3 columns here, the timestamp, which is recorded automatically, then the question we're asking our students, and then of course the document ID, which will be automatically populated when we run this script. Okay, so it sounds like a lot, but it's not too much. So here's where it can get a little tricky. So in this spreadsheet, like many of you have done before now with apps such as, or with scripts such as Doctopus and Autocrat, we need to once again insert a script from the script gallery. So we can click on Insert, and we can choose Script. And then you can go ahead and type in DocAppender. And you can see here's the latest version in English. And you can go ahead and install. And all of this should be very familiar if you use scripts before in the past. Once it's green, it means you're going to have to authorize it first. So at this point, you will now accept the authorization. And you will return again to the DocAppender menu item and run the initial installation. Once you've run that, nothing really happens. You just have to revisit this menu item one more time, and you can then move on to step 1, which is called Setup DocAppender. Now this launches a wizard that gives you some instructions. I'm just going to basically show you what needs to be done. So you can read this if you want to, but really the first thing you need to do is go to Tools. Again, this is in step 1. You go to Tools, and you want to open the script editor, which is kind of hidden behind the instructions box. So this, all of these items here, it's a big long script. This was all the work that went into getting your Google form to populate your Google Doc. Anyway, so at this point, you need to do a couple of things. You need to first save a version of this script, which I will walk you through. It's very simple. And then you need to deploy it as a web app. So I know that sounds scary, but it's really not. So let's start with step 1. File, and we're going down to Manage Versions. And we're just going to save a new version. And that's it. Painless. We have saved a version of the script. Step 2 now is to actually deploy it as a web app. So the way you do this is you go to Publish, and you just choose Deploy as a web app. Here's our project version, and we're going to execute this app as me. And then right now I'm the only person that has access to the app. Because of the scope of this project, really I'm the only one who needs to have access to this now. So then I'm just going to click Deploy, and I will get a confirmation that this project is now deployed as a web app. And this is the URL of that web app. And you'll see this in a bit. We're actually going to visit the URL here and see what this web app looks like. So you can then go ahead and click OK. Now we want to go back to the spreadsheet here. Step 1. So we've we've gone through, we've done everything they've asked for. This is the deploy as web app instructions. And we're going to just confirm the settings. And sometimes it takes a little while for after you click to kind of set things up. So now we move into another step one. So this is where we're actually setting up the script itself. So remember way back in the beginning we created a folder called exit tickets. Well, this is where we're going to need that. So we're going to choose that folder. I'm going to look for it among all of my Google Drive folders. Here it is, exit tickets. And now it's going to ask me for where the data is going to be coming from. So in this case, I can look down here. This is the sheet that has all of my data. It's called form responses. And once I've done that, it's now asking me for the column reserved for the document ID. Okay. This column is here, column C, and I can just choose it from here. And again, this is something that should not be altered, and perhaps what I should have done before is in the form itself, and I'll go back and change this later, but I can write something like, for official use only, please leave as is, because we do not want this form to be corrupted in any way. Otherwise, the script, it will not work. So now the field values you want appended to the document on form submit. So this is just a fancy way of saying, what do you want to throw onto that Google Doc? So, well, I want to obviously know what my students learned in that class. And I've decided to keep this one anonymous. I could have created a question that asked for the student's name, but I don't want the students to feel at all like they're being monitored. I want them to speak honestly. I want them to speak honestly but anonymously. So I would just say that's the only information I want to show up on the Google Doc. And then I'm going to choose the format to use for appending new entries. Okay, so I personally like the bulleted list. It gives a nice kind of separation per comment. Very easy to read, although you can create like tables as well. But I'm going to stick with the bulleted list. And then I'm just going to disregard this subfolder for each document in this folder. So I'm going to save these settings. It's going to do its thing. And notice how it's added a couple of columns to my spreadsheet. So again, these should not be modified either. So these are vital to making the script work. So great. We're almost there. Now we need to go back to the DocAppender menu item. And we need to get that URL for the web app. Okay? Copy. So here it is, and it shows me right away that I have this exit tickets folder, as well as an option to select the documents to which I want to append the responses to the question of this form. Now I need to choose which lesson I want to append the data to. So I'm going to choose lesson 1. And notice now, after I wait a little bit, this is the link to the form which is going to automatically populate my Google Doc on lesson 1, right? So again, just thinking back to this, if a student submits this form, whatever they write is going into Google Doc for lesson 1. Okay, so if this is a lesson on writing or rhyming structure in English class or something, I would indicate that at the top of that document, and then I would be able to read through all of these comments on one Google Doc, what my kids understood about rhyming structure at the end of that lesson. And notice here in the document ID, it's been pre-populated. So ultimately, I would just take this link, copy that, and I would paste it somewhere in Moodle, somewhere accessible to where the kids could just make one click and they would open this up. And if they submit something, so I'm just going to write something here quickly. I learned how to set up DocAppender and use it with my students. And when they hit submit, it'll give them confirmation that their question had been recorded, that their response was recorded rather. And if I go back to lesson 1 in my Google Drive, I can see that it has been appended to this document. So my question was, write about one thing you learned this class. I guess I should have said about one thing you learned in this class. I learned how to set up DocAppender, use it with my students, so on and so forth. So you can see how this bulleted list would grow if I had 15 to 20 students submitting their short answers to this question. And then I wouldn't have to go several places to figure out what my kids are getting out of my lessons. I could glance at this document and kind of get a sense of sort of what my kids are getting out of my class. So I know that was a lot of steps, but just to repeat, the end goal was to create a Google form for your students asking a very general question specific to the lesson of that day, which would then populate a Google Doc of your choice. So you could ask the same question for several lessons, and you would just literally change which Google Doc is being appended. So I hope that makes sense. And if it sounds very difficult and complicated, I'm more than happy to kind of talk you through this, because I do think this could be a very interesting way to kind of have sort of a class to document sort of the thinking going on in your class in a very efficient manner. You could pull out any given lesson and just see what it was that the kids got from that lesson. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial of DocAppender, and I look forward to hearing your stories about how you're using it with your students. Thanks for watching.